Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. In today's webinar, Chris Wesley will share tips on how to recruit, manage, and care for a team of parish volunteers. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Parish and Curriculum Marketing Specialist at Ave Maria Press. I would like to recognize our webinar partners, the National Conference for Catechetical Leadership, the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers, the National Association for Lay Ministry, and the Catholic Campus Ministry Association. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions may be sent to our presenter using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel. I'll read as many of those questions as possible at the end of the presentation today. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to you tomorrow via email. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Christopher Wesley is a youth ministry coach and consultant with Marathon Youth Ministry. He is the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry at St. Joseph Catholic Church in Cockeysville, Maryland, and the former Director of Student Ministry at the Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland. He also serves as the President of the Uncuffed Ministries Board of Directors in Baltimore, Maryland. Chris has authored 2 books, Rebuilding Youth Ministry and Rebuilding Confirmation. Chris, thank you so much for being with us today.
Erin, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to go ahead and make you the presenter. And we'll see everything that's on your screen. Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and close out my webcam and come back when you are all done.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody is ready and hanging in there. Please know that you're in my prayers as we go through this certain season. I don't know about you, but for me right now, one thing I do miss is connecting with my volunteers. So to talk about them, I'm really excited, but I'm also at the same time missing them dearly. And I can think of many different stories of where I've grown with them and learned from them. And one that comes to mind is this one day, one of my volunteers came up to me and she had a look of concern on her face, but I didn't have time to stop and like really get into it. So I just kind of asked, "Are you okay?" And my volunteer stammered a little bit and she said, "I'm fine, but are you?" And I asked her why. And she said, "Well, you kind of look tired and it looks like you went swimming." And I didn't know what she meant. And then she kind of pointed at my shirt and I like looked down and my shirt was just drenched in sweat. It was like the old man sweats, you know, like under the pit and like down the front. And I mean, there was sweat all over it, and even places that I don't think are appropriate to mention. But I wish I could say that I was in the midst of running a marathon, but the truth is I was in the midst of setting up for our program that night. You would think that the volunteer was being rude, but I hadn't asked anyone to come early to help me set up. It was something I thought that I could handle, but apparently not. Here's a free tip for all of you guys before we really get in. Keep an extra set of clothes in your office when you do ministry, seriously, because ministry gets messy. And not just in that circumstance, but ministry is messy, but it's also physically tasking. And I know that this might be an overstatement, but really, ministry is messy right now. For so many of us, we're probably not thinking about volunteers because parish employees left and right are being furloughed and fired, and we're just trying to figure out how to like keep our jobs alive. We might not be thinking about surviving and building a team of volunteers, but maybe that shouldn't be the last thing on your list. Maybe that's something that should be on the forefront of our list. And that's where I want to encourage you to see that this time we have away from the busyness, from the craziness of life, really we can do 2 things. And we should do 2 things. The first thing is care for our volunteers that we have. And secondly, we can take time to put in place a system where we can build that team of volunteers, because if we're honest, we need a group of people who are going to help us get through this. And we need a group of people who are going to help us think about ministry differently. So what I want to do with you today is share with you some principles and steps that I believe are transferable, not only from the real world, but the virtual world. Because without the men and women who serve by our side, you and I are at risk of feeling alone. We're at risk of growing frustrated. or risk at burning out and even possibly leaving ministry altogether. Without a team, we're engaging in ministry in a very dangerous way. Unfortunately, this took me a couple of years to figure out. See, I was doing ministry for a long time as a lone ranger, everything from writing the messages to leading the games to setting up the tables and chairs and cleaning up afterwards. And once in a while, there was an adult to help me out, but it was more of a one-time deal. And to be honest and transparent, that's sort of what happened to me again when we transitioned into stay-at-home quarantine living. To get in touch with students, to set up virtual ministry, to set up virtual church. I started to do things on my own until I remembered that I can't do this on my own. See, I'm sure many of us have this shared experience. And maybe it was hosting a meeting or building a retreat. Maybe it was creating an event. Maybe it was setting up virtual ministry. We took it upon ourselves to do everything. And if you think about it, it's somewhat contradictory. Actually, not somewhat, it is contradictory to what Christ did. Because Christ, he never traveled alone. He always had a group of people around him. We see this when he sends 2 disciples into town to reserve a room for Passover. We see this when the disciples distribute the loaves and fishes. We see this when Jesus tells Peter to lead a Zoom meeting. Okay, maybe that didn't happen, but if you look through the Gospels, throughout the Gospels, Jesus never did ministry alone. And I think we get that. I think we get that we have to have a team. And some of us have a team or we're part of a team, but maybe we're wondering why that team doesn't grow. Or maybe you're wondering right now, why can't you mobilize your team to help you through this virtual ministry? And I think it's in times like this where we have to identify some of the obstacles. And one of those obstacles is pride. See, delegation and commissioning others to serve in our ministry is an act of humility. See, if you believe that you are the most talented and hardest working person on your team, then you've got a pride issue. See, when you think no one else is as committed as you, then you'll hold things back. Worse than that, you'll sabotage the efforts of others when they come up with a great idea if it isn't yours. The truth is, no matter how much of an expert you are, you can't do this on your own. See, a great leader surrounds himself or herself with men and women who are smarter than them. They surround themselves with people who can share ideas. All right, another obstacle is guilt. Guilt is a huge one, and this is one that hits me the most. See, you might feel guilty asking people to do certain things in your ministry. And to be honest, I hate administrative work like spreadsheets and budgeting. In fact, there are many people on our staff who would agree with me that I hate that because I do not like it and it's a difficult task for me. And because it's a difficult task for me, it's difficult for me to ask anyone to take it on. In fact, for years, I would do all the photocopying, spreadsheets, recording, and scanning that ministry required. Finally, one day, I had someone approach me about serving. And they said, hey, listen, Chris, I can't serve on the regular night that you're with teenagers, but I'd be more than willing to serve you in the office, even if it's getting you coffee or doing spreadsheets. And I said, wait, did you just say spreadsheets? And she was like, yeah, I'll do spreadsheets. And so I was really excited because I said, listen, all I have this week that I need to do is registrations and running spreadsheets and developing curriculum. Can you help me out with that? And she responded, great. See, there are people who love to do the things that you despise. There are people who love to do the things that challenge you, especially if you're thinking about social media frustrates me or going virtual, it overwhelms me. There are men and women in your pews or maybe at home right now who love doing that stuff and are willing to help you figure that out. Next obstacle I want to talk about is a limited scope, right? A limited scope of what a team can actually do. And this is so relevant, especially with what we're facing right now, right? Because you might have a team of doers who are great at maybe showing up and setting up chairs or tables, maybe helping you decorate the church for different liturgical seasons. But the point of a dynamic team is not just to get things off your list. It's meant to bring your parish to a new level, your ministry to a new level. This is especially key for what we're facing right now. I mean, think about all the men and women, again, who have experience with social media, email marketing, graphic design, and web design. There are people in your parish that are looking for ways to help. They're looking for ways to serve the community. So that's where we have to think outside the box and ask, what can they do? See, knowing what a dynamic team can do will not only lift a burden, but it's going to help us reach more people. And we see this in the Acts of the Apostle. See, the early church was growing, and so was the need to serve so many different people. And so we see in the books of Acts this. At that time, as the number of disciples continued to grow, the Hellenists complained against the Hebrews because their widows were being neglected in daily distribution. So, so the 12 called together the community of disciples and said, "It is not right for us to um, neglect the word of God to serve at the table. So, brothers, select from among you." Brothers, select from among you 7 reputable men filled with the Spirit, and whom we shall appoint to this task, whereas we devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry. So, just think about that situation. Have you ever been in that situation before where, uh, a parent comes to you and says, "What about my kid?" Or a group in your parish comes to your pastor and says, "What about us?" You're always serving the families, you're always serving the young people. I mean, here we are in this situation where the disciples are being approached by a group and saying, "What about the widows?" And so instead of saying like, "Well, we'll take it on," they say, "Let's delegate. Let's share this with, let's find 7 reputable men filled with the Spirit and wisdom who we shall appoint to this task, whereas we shall devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word." See, the disciples agree that this is a need that should be addressed, but they also know that God has called them to ministry of the word and prayer. So what do? Again, they delegate the task. They build a team to serve the widows, and they think outside the box. All right, the last obstacle I'll talk about is busyness. These are not the only obstacles, but for me, these are the top 4 that I've struggled with. Right now, we're all busy because we're figuring out how to do life differently. See, instead of running faster, we need to slow things down. We don't have to be in a virtual meeting to do work. In fact, what I would say is one of the things that we should be doing is taking the time to sit down and dream big about our ministry. Pick up the phone, call a parishioner, call a volunteer, call a parent, see how they're doing. Take the time to slow things down and just connect with people. Don't get caught in the busyness, because when you're caught in the busyness, what you do is you could be accelerating yourself towards failure. You could be accelerating yourself towards disaster. As I mentioned before, I get too busy to ask people for help because I'm in over my head so many times. I feel like if I stop, then everything around me will crumble. And that's tied with my pride, but it's also tied with my schedule. Recruiting and developing ministry takes time. And if I'm too busy, then I'm missing the big picture. So when it comes to caring for and building a dynamic team of volunteers, it all starts with naming those obstacles and then bringing them to prayer. See, we need to believe that God will bring us the people we need to get the job done. And again, we see this throughout scripture when God unites the people behind Joshua to tear down the walls of Jericho. We see this when David rallies the people together to build the temple, and when Nehemiah rallies the people to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. There are people in your pews and community capable of helping you do something special. You just need to pray for them. And as you pray, it's all about knowing how to invite them to serve. How do we invite them to serve? How do we get people involved? Well, I remember debating years ago whether or not to include the question directed towards parents, would you like to volunteer on our middle school program application? This is back before online registration. This was just paper, right? So before you made 1,000 copies and mailed them out, you wanted to really make sure that everything was on the page that you needed on the page, because there was no going back and editing and remailing it out. So I remember just pining over this and thinking like, okay, do I put this question, do you want to serve, on the page? Because why would a parent want to help me? After all, aren't I supposed to be helping them? And so I went back and forth, and finally I said, you know what, forget it. We're going to put it there. And so I sent out the applications and mailed them out to parents. And as they came back, looked through them and didn't see anything different but the contact info. But one day there it was, a little check mark right by that question. Would you like to volunteer? Right by yes, there was a little check mark that said, would you like to volunteer? Yes. I felt like Charlie in the film Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you know, as he peeled back that wrapper to discover the final golden ticket. It's funny because it wasn't like this was my only volunteer, but it was the first one I had recruited on my own. And so I jumped on my computer, opened my email, and shot a thank you for making my day email to a woman named Jeanette. And little did I know that God had blessed me with someone who would not only help me welcome teens and grow the youth ministry, but be a huge part of my life, even up to today. Again, there are people at home, there are people in your pews waiting for you to reach out and invite them, uh, uh, waiting to be invited to serve. And we all have to change our strategy to recruit, and we shouldn't hold back just because we're homebound. So here are a couple of suggestions that I think if you want to recruit and invite people to serve, especially to help you create and craft a virtual ministry, try a postcard, right? Just go onto a website like canva.com or, uh, or just even with a Word document, print out a postcard saying, hey, would you like to serve? Would you help me build a virtual ministry? You know, just send out a postcard or create a video announcement for social media. Just go on your phone or a tablet or your laptop and record that video and send it out on Facebook or Instagram or whatever your social media platform of choice is. Or if your pastor, if your parish is streaming virtual church, people are watching him. Have your pastor make a plug before streaming mass to help you out with your virtual ministry, youth ministry, children's ministry, even your outreach work that you're trying to do. While you reach out though, make sure you answer the question, what are you inviting them to do? Because this is a huge part of it, right? We want volunteers, we say, we need help, I need help, but we never think about what we're inviting them to do. So first thing is invite them to a bigger picture. I want you to think about this. If I were to ask you what's the propositional value for an adult to serve in your ministry, what would be your response? Let me ask that again. If I were to ask you what the propositional value, why it's worth for them to serve in your ministry, what would your response be? Most times when I ask clients that question, I get answers like, well, you get to see, in regards to youth ministry, you get to see the next generation embrace their faith, or you get to see families come to know Christ, or you get to make an impact on the community and the rest of the world. And those are all good answers. And they're worth, communicating. But if a person is confidence, they'll probably say thanks, but I don't know if that's me. And that's where we have to paint, I think, a different perspective. In addition to all those reasons, we have to help potential volunteers discover that what they get from it. I know that sounds selfish, but the response is, I don't have time, or I don't think I can connect with teens or with children, or I don't know if my theology is up to par. All those reasons are reasons people are stepping away. And that's when you have to say, well, when you get involved in my ministry, or when you get involved in this ministry, you'll start to find the time that you spend with others, teens or kids, will be time investing in your own discipleship. When you serve in this ministry, you'll discover how to be your true, authentic self. When you serve in this ministry, you're going to learn how to grow in your faith because people are going to ask you questions, or you'll be in situations that you haven't found yourself before, and you're going to rely on your faith. In other words, the propositional value of serving in ministry is not only life change for the people that you're serving, but also life change for the volunteer. See, I tell my volunteers that their lives will be blessed if they get involved. And that might seem like a bold promise, but think about your own life. Think about your own life. Think about a time when you've been blessed in your ministry, by your ministry. Write down that story. Share that story as a testimony and use it as a way of helping people see why serving in ministry matters, not only for the people that you serve, but for themselves. Another thing your volunteers get from serving is they be part of the coolest community in church world. Right? Many of my coworkers don't appreciate when I get up in front of the congregation to make a pitch about serving in youth ministry. And that's because I tell the congregation that youth ministry is the best ministry in the world. And I've claimed it. I was the first to claim it, so no one can refute it. I know it sounds arrogant, but it's true. After all, if you think about it, as Christians, aren't we meant to follow Christ, right? I mean, did you know that Christ was actually a youth minister? And if you don't believe me, then you got to check out the story of Zebedee and the sons of Zebedee and their mother. The scripture says, then the mother of the sons of Zebedee approached him with her sons and did him homage, wishing to ask him for something. And he said to her, what do you wish? And she answered him, command that these two sons of mine sit one at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. And Jesus said in reply, you don't know what you're asking. That's right. St. John and St. James, the sons of Zebedee, were teenagers. Why else would their mom go to Jesus and say, you got to help me out? And on a side note, I love how Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Sometimes I wish I had that kind of authority to respond in that, but but then again, I don't. I might get in trouble and everything, but Jesus was their youth minister. And I don't see Jesus being an usher. He got others to do that. So yeah, youth ministry, it's the coolest ministry in our church. Maybe it's not in your church. Maybe if you're the DRE or in charge of ushers, you can make that, but claim it. Make your ministry the coolest ministry. Make it a place where people want to connect with one another, because that's going to create a stronger team. See, when your team has community, they work better together, can rely on each other as gifts. They know that they don't have to just go to you. And the way that you create community is you by praying together. You can't over explain or overemphasize the importance of prayer, right? When do you guys pray together as a team? Are you guys praying together now, even though you're disconnected? Again, it's important to pray together before you serve in ministry and even outside of ministry. Pray together as a team. In addition to that, you'll want to grow together. You'll want to grow as a team. You'll want to grow in different ways with having fun and learning together. So ask yourself this question: how is my team growing together? How are we learning together? How are we sharpening each other's skills? And then also have some fun together. Ministry that is healthy is a ministry that has a good time together. It's a place where joy is contagious. Make your ministry the best one to serve and create a culture that your volunteers will want to tell their friends about. Tell them over and over again. If you know someone you think would be great in this ministry, let me know. And they have people in their lives that you're not aware of, which means your capacity to recruit has expanded. They'll know of neighbors and spouses, friends and family members that can come in and contribute. Share the burden of growing your team with other volunteers. And then another thing, and just going back to growing together, it's important that you invest in their formation. You want leaders who are disciples growing disciples. So in addition to life change and community, you need to show potential leaders how you will equip them to be better disciples. What does that mean? Well, it means identifying characteristics of a healthy leader. When you think about volunteers, what qualities do you want? At our parish that I currently serve at, St. Joseph in Cockeysville, we want disciples who are growth-oriented, who are empathetic, who are joy-filled, who are rooted in Christ, and collaborative. Let me say that again: growth-oriented, empathetic, joyful, rooted in Christ, and collaborative. Granted, we might not get these people right away, but that's what we're going to help them become. And to help our leaders become that type of leader, we make training a priority. We make training a priority. Have you ever wondered what formation for your team looks like? Granted, your team might not be up for another virtual meeting at this time, but you can take the time to create video trainings that discuss small group leaderships, listening to teens, connecting with parents, or creating a culture of hospitality. Think about your calendar for the next year and plot out at least 4 trainings that you can either do virtually online or in person. And focus on those characteristics of what you think is a healthy leader or a healthy disciple. Now you might wonder, well, Chris, how do I get people to show up? Because the way it worked before was by planning the training. How do I get people to show up? Because when I plan these trainings, no one shows up, no one has time to show up. And granted, people might not be as busy as they were now, but they need a reason to show up. So before all this self-quarantine happened, what we used to do was we would take a day of our ministry and we would cancel program for the teens, and we'd have our leaders come in. So what that meant was kids stayed at home, but leaders came in and we learned together. And it was great for our team because it was not an additional night that they had to come in or come out during the week. At the same time, it's built into my schedule, so my focus wasn't lost at all. But let's just say you don't have that luxury of, bringing people in, or you're not a part of a consistent ministry like youth ministry. When you do trainings, think about the things that people are sacrificing to come in. Maybe they have to pay for a babysitter. Maybe they have to think about food. Can your parish offer free babysitting while you have that meeting? Can you feed them and even their families while they're popping in? Virtually right now, you might be free at 12 o'clock during the day. Some people are still working. Can you schedule your meeting at 8 o'clock at night after their kids are asleep? Can you use a Zoom call or FaceTime or GoToMeetings or whatever platform you're using? When you have your meetings, think about the things that people have to sacrifice to be there. Also, during your trainings, think about the different activities that you have. If it's something that you can just communicate via an email or record a video on, don't have a meeting. In your meetings, though, think about something that you can do together where you grow together. Maybe it's an activity. Maybe it's having a little bit of fun. Maybe it's collaborating on different ideas. But you want to make training a priority. And in addition to making training a priority, you want to share with them resources like books and podcasts. Bring them to conferences. Share with them webinars that they can attend. When you're recruiting someone into your ministry, you want to make sure you're able to show them how you will help them succeed. Okay, this might seem like a lot to explain, and that's when you invite someone into ministry, you need to invite them into opportunities where they can learn more. Again, it doesn't matter if you send them a postcard or meet someone after Mass, your invitation should be an invitation into an opportunity where you can convey the bigger picture, the community, and the investment. When you make the invitation, though, I suggest three options. One is sorry, my notes are a little confused here, but one option is a one-on-one conversation. Now, you can't invite them in for a cup of coffee or a bite to eat right now, except if you do that over FaceTime. When you're inviting people to serve, set up a one-on-one conversation and get to know them personally. Usually, that takes the most amount of work, but it has the highest success rate, meeting one-on-one to someone, because then you have the time to share your story. You have time to invite someone to get to know their story, to explain your ministry a little bit better. So option one, when it comes to making an invitation, is set up a one-on-one conversation. Option two, open house. An open house is basically an opportunity where you invite them to see your ministry. Now, that might be a little bit difficult now, but when we're all physically present again, don't be afraid to have shadow opportunities where men and women can come in and shadow your volunteers and see what the energy feels like, that they get a taste for what ministry looks like. At my last parish church of the Nativity, it was something we called the first serve opportunity, where basically we allowed people to, give ministry a try, no commitment outside of that one time. And if they liked it, they came back and they went through the orientation process. If not, no big deal. Another opportunity is to put together a presentation, a pump-up presentation. When you need to recruit a lot of people at once, it can be difficult to meet with them one-on-one or even invite them to your programs. Too many visitors will change the dynamics and present a false impression. But a pump-up presentation doesn't have the same success rate as the other two, but it does create an experience where people can get a taste of what serving in ministry is like. So how can you do that maybe virtually? Maybe one of the things is invite some of your teens, invite some of your volunteers, whoever you're serving with, to jump on a presentation and share that with anyone who might be involved in serving in ministry. Share some funny videos, play some Zoom games, different things like that, but make that pump up presentation an experience. So when it comes to recruiting volunteers, you want to make sure that you've made the invitation and you've recruited a volunteer. But the big question that some of us might have is, how do we help them stay? Well, to help your volunteers stay, you need a development plan. You need a development plan, and that plan begins with an onboarding process. Throwing someone into youth ministry or any ministry can be like asking someone who's never swam before to take their first lesson in the Atlantic Ocean. It's intimidating, and that's where you need an onboarding process that starts before someone actually serves. Let's go back and pretend that the potential volunteer that you've invited to serve says, yes, I'm in. You need to make sure that you give them very clear steps on what they need to do next. For most of us, that's child protection training, even if they're not serving in children and youth ministry. But give them a timetable and let them know how long that process should take to complete. Tell them who they should contact if they hit an issue. Then let them know what they should expect when they've completed that paperwork. On top of orienting them with child protection protocol, give them a start date and time of when they should arrive. Let them know what to bring, how to dress, whether they should eat beforehand. Don't be afraid to over communicate what might seem insignificant or obvious to you, because it could be a factor in the success of their first day. And that's important. Tell them who they need to check in with or who will greet them when they arrive, not only for the first day, but for the 30 days or 30 days that they serve after that. You want to make sure that someone is there to walk with them, to accompany them, to mentor them and train them. Even if it's something as simple as opening doors or serving pizza, give them someone who can show them the ropes and connect them into the community. As they get more comfortable, you'll see them engage further in ministry, but don't assume that because someone said yes, that they're committed indefinitely. Before, we talked about training them, and this is key. But in addition to that, you need to check in with them regularly. As your ministry grows, it's important to check in with your volunteers to learn what they see. It not only keeps you connected to their confidence, but introduces you to the aspects of your ministry you might have missed. See, one practice that we had is we used to assemble some of our newer volunteers to share their opinions, ask them what are the things that they're seeing or learning. By doing this, we got a fresh perspective on what was going on. When you're in the trenches of youth ministry or ministry for years, it's easy to take things for granted. New volunteers shed light on some of those issues that you might have missed. In addition to formal evaluations, take time to meet with them one-on-one. Again, grab a cup of coffee or pick up the phone and ask them, how's life? And in fact, in this climate, in this season, this is so important. How many of you have checked in with your volunteers within these last couple of weeks or days? Have you asked them how their family's holding up? Like what tangible needs they might have? Not that you have the solution for that, but it's important for us to check in with them and see where they are spiritually, where they are mentally, emotionally, and even physically. This is the time to check in. See, one of the problems that we face when it comes to ministry is we get so caught in the busyness and the day-to-day work that we never really slow down to see what the health of the team looks like. And when we let that go on for too long, it's a problem that festers and sometimes makes a mess, such a mess that it creates so much damage and it's hard to respond by. So we need to regularly check in with them. And not only do we need to check in with our volunteers, we need to make sure that they're clear on their roles and the responsibilities. See, one of the biggest reasons a volunteer will leave your ministry is because they'll burn themselves out. I mean, think about yourselves. If you don't have a clear idea of what you're supposed to do, it can be frustrating. That's where some of us are right now, right? We don't have a clear idea of what we're supposed to do, and it's just frustrating and it's draining. And it's easily to get distracted and stuck on unnecessary projects. A lack of clarity leads to a lack of uncertainty, or leads to uncertainty. While review meetings are key, you can cut down on the confusion with reporting structure and job descriptions. And I need volunteers to do so many different things, and to help them do those different things, I'll put it out in a job description. I'll put it out in sort of a document of things that they should be doing. And I know that might sound so business-like to create a structure and job roles, but when you have people know what they're supposed to do and who they can go to for help, it's going to bring them peace and it's going to bring them confidence. And you can provide that with a structure and a job description. And if you don't know how to start, definitely feel free to reach out to us at marathonyouthministry.com, and we'd be more than happy to help you. See, developing your team starts with setting them up for success. It starts about checking in with them, clarifying their roles, but it also involves celebrating their success. As I mentioned earlier, our jobs as leaders of our ministry is to care for our teams. And one of the best ways to care for them is to celebrate what's going on inside and outside their ministries. Your volunteers, they have birthdays, they have anniversaries, and they have goals. And if you know about those things, you can celebrate them. And you can go out all out, or you can simply write them a card. And I think that this is important, especially now when we're isolated in quarantine. And I'm sorry if I'm a broken record on this, but your volunteers' lives, our lives are still going on. And you might not have the chance to see them in person, or it might not seem a little less significant to put on Facebook, hey, happy birthday. Write them a birthday card, send them a postcard if you know an anniversary is coming up. Celebrate the things that are going on in their life. And from a ministry standpoint, whenever we see a volunteer kill it in our ministry, we write them a note. And if you have it in your budget, we get them a gift card or a treat that they would specifically enjoy. See, we want to make sure that what we're doing is special, and that we show our volunteers value, that they are more than just a warm body helping us out, that they are someone worth celebrating. And in addition to what they do inside of ministry, I want to celebrate what's happening again in their personal lives. So think about what is going on in the lives of your volunteers. What are things that are worth celebrating, especially in these dire times? And I know that we can't have our end of the year parties or picnics or barbecues or anything along those lines. So we have to be really cognizant of different ways that we can celebrate our volunteers, especially during this difficult time. See, I love the men and women who serve alongside of me, and I do my best to tell them that. If you love your volunteers, if you really want to care for that team, you need to tell them that you love them. Show them that you love them by inviting them into something bigger than the world can ever offer. Show them that you love them by walking with them through life. Remind them that you love them by celebrating them. And not only will they stick around and engage further, but your love will be a reminder of how they should treat one another and the teens they serve. If you want a healthier ministry, you need healthy volunteers. And if you aren't sure about your next step, then let us help. See, before we conclude this webinar and everything, I want you to feel like you can reach out to us at Marathon Youth Ministry. Simply just go to marathonyouthministry.com or shoot us an email at questions@marathonyouthministry.com. Or if you need additional training in some of these areas, like building a team of volunteers or small groups, enroll in MYMU today. For only $25 a month, you'll receive online training through different courses. We also have cohorts where you receive coaching as a group. We have mini webinars and things we call hangouts, where we talk about different things like self-care, balancing work and home life, financial management, especially in this time. So if you're interested in ongoing training in this, go to marathonyouthministry.com/MYMU. Or go to marathonyouthministry.com and click on membership to learn more. And if your parish or you are facing financial hardship at this time, feel free to contact us at questions@marathonyouthministry.com, because we'll give you a special promo code where we'll wipe away the monthly fee until this hardship is over with. So if you're looking for that, definitely reach out to us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't help out a buddy of mine in ministry. If you're looking for ways to gift your volunteers, especially if they miss the scents and smells of church, visit my buddy Tony Vicinda at Catholic Bombco. If you go to marathonyouthministry.com/Catholic, sorry, I can't read the line, but if you go to the link listed here, we'll give you 10% off of your next purchase there. But basically, if you're looking at fun gifts to give your volunteers, definitely check out my friend Tony at Catholic Bombco. Remember, your volunteers are important. They're key. And during this time, there's two things you can do. It's one, reach out to them to see if your current volunteers are okay. And two, think about the bigger picture. I want to thank you so much for taking this time to sit down and chat with me virtually. I hope you're doing well, and I'm going to turn it back over to Erin for any questions that we might have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. You gave us some really great practical ideas to, I'm sure, continue the good work that so many people are already doing. I encourage you all to, or whoever is interested, to go ahead and use the question box to send a question to Chris. As I mentioned earlier, Phoebe's asking, yes, this has been recorded, and we will send you an email tomorrow with the link to this recording. Um, Zena said, "Thank you so much. I will definitely check in with my volunteers." Yes,
Awesome.
that's something that kind of struck me, like such a simple but really important thing to do. And I know that the topic of this webinar is about volunteers, but I was wondering, are you doing anything now at this time to check in with the youth of your church?
Yeah, and that's a really big question that a lot of people have been tackling. So if you're already present on social media, I know a lot of youth ministers, including our youth ministry, has reached out through Instagram. That's the main way we connect with teens. But what we have to recognize, and I don't think a lot of us have thought about, is there are different rules. Like kids 13 or under 13 aren't on most social media platforms because legally they're not supposed to be. Some parents don't allow their kids to have phones, especially middle school students that we're talking about. So the way that we've been connecting with teens is by reaching through their parents. And if we do a virtual night using a platform like Zoom or GoToMeetings, we make sure that we get parental consent in that way, because you want to make sure that you're, like you said, it's not just about caring for your volunteers, but caring for your teens as well.
Hmm. Okay, awesome. Mary Lou asks, any suggestions for large parishes? She's talking like 6,500 families. How do you deal with great numbers? It's a good problem to have, I imagine, first of all.
Oh yeah, that's a great. So in regards to great numbers, I mentioned the three different invitations. One's the one-on-one. I think as lay ecclesial ministers, as youth ministers or DREs, when you are recruiting people, you should always be trying to set up like one or two conversations a week where you're just chatting with people. And I know that doesn't answer your question right away, but that's for the larger events. That's where you really need to connect with your parish staff and say, okay, how do we recruit for volunteers just in general? And you got to create that volunteer culture. And that was one thing that we were really successful at Nativity, and they still are very successful with recruiting volunteers, is once or twice a year, we would have this event where the pastor would talk about the importance of serving ministry, and not just in the announcements, but a part of his homily. And so that when we got to the ask, we had people come to this event. And what you want to do is try to get as many people come to this event where you showcase the different ministries, knowing that that number is going to dwindle down as you get further along in the process. But when you need to recruit in large numbers, that's where you need to do more than just a pulpit announcement. You need your whole staff on the same page.
Absolutely. Xenia says, I Zoom with my students. We are still continuing our catechism. That's so great during, again, at all times, but especially during this time.
Well, and
Go ahead.
one thing I'll say with that, Aaron, too, is what you can do as a recruiting tool or a teaching tool is record some of those sessions and
Mm,
share those with your volunteers or future volunteers to show them what it looks like to have that relationship with the teens as well.
absolutely. So use what you're doing already as
Mhm.
ways to recruit and even form your current volunteers. Yeah.
Right.
Consuelo says, how do you ensure the professional line does not get blurred when it comes to creating a relationship with your team of volunteers?
That's where an onboarding process and training is essential, right? Pretty much every diocese has a child protection protocol, and it's making sure that one, they comply with that. Secondly, that's where your accountability is key, making sure that the phrase is like too deep, right? That you always have two volunteers together, so there's accountability, and that's where regular formation is important, right? And you maybe not focus on the negative side of it, but the positive, right? How do you have healthy relationships with teens? What are the things that they need to know? Because a lot of these men and women, if you're not communicating what those healthy boundaries look like, then they might accidentally cross that, right? Like I know in our diocese, you're not allowed to individually text a teenager on the phone, right? And that for one of your volunteers, especially if they're a parent of teenagers, where they already have like maybe a direct line to their son or their daughter's friends, they might not understand that. And that's where you have to communicate that and clarify that up front.
Great. Diana said, thanks for sharing your ideas. James, he says, I'm your neighbor in Bethesda. Would you consider coming down to be with us to share your wisdom with me and my fellow DREs? here in MONT period county when hopefully this blows over?
Definitely. I would say I can get as close as 6 feet
Contact.
right now, but yeah, I would be more than happy, or you're more than welcome to come up here and just shoot us an email at questions@marathonyouthministry.com.
Questions at
Youth Ministry.
marathonyouthministry.com. Okay.
Yep.
Maribel asks, when doing training, what are the things that can be trained versus competencies that they need to bring with them?
That's a great question. So when you look at competencies with information, that's the type of stuff that maybe you want to print out on digital pages, email. Don't be afraid to create even like a manual, a PDF manual, because we have to remember people learn in different ways, right? So don't be afraid to print out like a manual of things that volunteers should know. When you do your actual trainings, I like to make those experiential learning. So one of the things that we do for our youth is we set up, or for our volunteers, is we set up tables for our gatherings, and I make sure that there's small group discussion time. And granted, not all of our volunteers are small group leaders, but we make sure that during our training that they engage in what small groups will look like. We also uh, I'll have another volunteer present during some of my trainings, or we'll have presentations to teach them how to talk in front of other people in that regard. Sometimes we'll do an activity or a game that we do with the teens, not just to have fun, but also to show them like some of the games that we might showcase in our youth ministry as well. So I think one, you have to understand that people learn in different ways. One might be just reading off a PDF, or a sheet, and other people, they might need to experience that as well.
Great idea. Maribel asks, what role could the elderly parishioners have who want to be involved but may not feel that they have a role with the teens?
Yeah, I think we have to debunk that myth. In fact, one of my best and probably most popular volunteers at this time is a guy named Ed, and Ed is 83 years old, and he is a sixth grade boys small group leader. So just imagine that, right? An 83-year-old guy is a co-leader with another guy for sixth grade boys, and Ed has more energy than these guys combined. So there are older people out there who have plenty of energy, but for those who are a little reluctant, what I tell them is that they have so much wisdom and they have so much knowledge, and they probably have more patience than other people because they've seen it all, to serve with teens. And if they're afraid of not being relevant, actually one thing that kind of came to mind, and this is Ed again, is when we were having one of our virtual meetups, and I made the statement that none of us have ever really experienced something like this before. And Ed jumped in and he said, well, as a kid, I had polio. And he talked about being quarantined as a kid. And he really could connect with these teenagers because he could say, I've been in a similar situation that we're all experiencing now. And so what the reason I'm sharing that is because it's important and I think essential for us to show men and women, no matter what age they are, the relevancy or the way that they can help or serve the next generation.
Awesome. He lived through it and survived, right? And
Yeah, yeah,
which gives
yeah,
hope too, definitely.
definitely.
Yeah. Jane says, at our parish, we use the Remind phone platform to stay in touch. We're using Zoom meeting to continue our small group Bible study, youth drop-ins with our CYM, calling at least 5 youth and their parents each day just to check in. We use Instagram teaching, for example, how to make crosses from palms.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes, that is awesome. Cecilia asked, can we get a copy, oh no, of this presentation material? Yes, we're going to send an email with a link to this recording. Let's see. Do you have samples of promotional materials for recruiting volunteers, things we can use for parish website or church bulletin?
We're currently developing that, and some of those resources are available at MYMU. As I mentioned before, we have an online course called Building a Dynamic Team of Volunteers, with videos that you can share with your team of volunteers, as well as resources to help recruit them, job description templates, and everything like that. So again, if you head over to marathonyouthministry.com and click on membership, you can learn more about membership there. And we have some of those resources on our in our store as well. Again, just head over to marathonyouthministry.com.
Great, thank you. Linda asked, do you ever encounter reluctance from volunteers to attend trainings?
Oh, yeah. I used to get that all the time, especially when you start out. And part of the thing we have to recognize is that people have been a part of really bad training experiences. And it might not be yours, but it might be someone else's. So that's where you have to make sure that your training experiences are quality. And while you don't want to force someone against your will, you want to at least have them try it out once. And that's where you have to recruit also your other volunteers to hype those things up and make sure that they're not the only one there. Because even if they're not there for your content, they might be there for the community. And so that's why having a community feel for your trainings is essential, is key.
And I imagine word gets out then when they've gone to
Mhm,
something that's been worthwhile and fun and a
mhm.
community. Yes, yes. Okay.
Yeah, in fact, one time, we would give out, well, not one time, we give out prizes sometimes if we play the games. So volunteers would walk away with a prize, and that was really cool. There was another time where we had, a Chipotle burrito bar, and that was like fun because it was unique and it was special for them. So make those trainings special, make those trainings unique, and people want to come back to them.
Yes, awesome. Mary says, we are about to amalgamate 3 of our local churches into one family of parishes. Any suggestions for bringing the volunteer base together to be open to moving away from the current silo model of serving in individual churches to serving where there is a need? Certainly recognizing the sensitive issue of people feeling loyal to their current parish.
Mm, yeah, yeah. So that's where you want to create a strategic leadership team with your volunteers. So what you probably want to do is find 1 or 2 people from those parishes that can represent those parishes, but aren't necessarily vying for them. They're committed to you as the leader, and you can sit down with them and collaborate the different ways of bringing those volunteers together, bringing people together for a common vision and mission. And so by having a strategic leadership team, they can help you sort of figure out the different nuances that come with your parish. But I would say focus on community, focus on collaboration, even with the greater group of volunteers. Think of it different events or things you can do together to bring them together to get to know one another.
Mhm. Laura says, I'm in a large parish and my ministry is getting our families to do service learning at our parish and in our community. I have volunteers to run these activities, but I have trouble getting the families to sign up to do them. I have a core group of families who sign up regularly, but how can I attract more families to want to sign up? I do talk about the value of serving together, etc., at our family program catechesis sessions, but I think they're so busy they don't see it as a priority.
Hmm. Well, and that's the thing is, I think we're so busy. Um, what I want everyone to do is think about how sometimes when you're so busy, you ignore the things that are good for you, right? You ignore the things that are of value for you. And so before we ask something for families to do, or ask them, sorry, let me rephrase that. Before we ask something from families, we have to ask something for families. And what I mean by that is if you want parents to sign up for these service projects, that's great. And, and if they're saying no or they're not responding to that, that's when you reach out and just say, hey, what's something I can do for you? Because like I'd really love for you to be a part of these experiences, but it looks like maybe you're not equipped or you're ready or you're able to do that. Or even if you know them well enough, it looks like you're busy with this. What's something that I can do to help you with that? Because then what you're doing is you're not only helping them with that issue, but you're showing that you care and you're creating capacity for them then to engage in the thing that you want from them. So before you think what you want from them, think about what you want, what you can ask for them, or what you can do for them.
Yes. Aaron asks, what is the best approach for working with volunteers who were in place before you arrived at a parish? How do you
Yes.
balance that with wanting to recruit your own volunteers?
Yeah, so when you inherit volunteers, it depends how long you've been there. I don't recommend, you know, reshifting or firing or anything like that the first 6 months to a year that you're there. You know, inherit people and get to know them, get to know their strengths, build that relationship and that rapport with them. And if there is a connection there, then when you start to restructure the ministry or redirect them, it's going to be a little bit easier to do that. Give yourself about a year of just with those current volunteers. Try to recruit new volunteers at the same time. And then after that anniversary happens, you can then go to your team and say, all right, listen, I've been here for a year. I've been observing, taking notes, talking to all of you guys. And this is the direction I think the ministry is going to go. And this is what I'd like to do, this, and this. And I want to invite you to be a part of that. Make sure that you clarify that you want to invite them to be a part of that. Because then what you're doing is you're giving them a choice to either step out or step on. And if they say, yes, I'm on board, but then later, go against that, you can say, well, I gave you the option, and we want people who are part of this ministry, or you're reluctant or pushing forward, you say like, hey, I gave you this invitation, but maybe this isn't the right fit. Let's find a different place for you to serve. But yeah, when it comes to inheriting volunteers, sometimes unless they're doing something immoral or illegal, like we basically have to figure out ways to get to know them and work with them before we ask them to continue to serve with us or to step away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, Chris, obviously this is an important ministry, regarding the number of questions that you have received today. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experience, as well as all of the resources that you have available at your Marathon Youth Ministry site. I thank everybody for joining us today. And we wanted to offer you a little discount here in light of what's going on right now, 25% off your entire order, as well as free shipping. When you use code webinar0407, which is for today's date, when you order at avemariapress.com. There are a few exceptions to this, but that'll be shown in your email tomorrow, like textbooks and our marriage preparation program, things like that. Ave is closed right now due to the stay-at-home mandate. Next week, though, we'll be getting the orders out. So you can go that route, getting the 25% off, or you can look at Amazon.com. All of our books, including the 2 books from Chris, Rebuilding Youth Ministry and Rebuilding Confirmation, are available on Amazon, as well as available in ebooks. So that's something that you can get right away. And as I mentioned, this has been recorded, and we're going to share that link with you tomorrow in the email that we send you. Please join us next week when Tracy Trasenko's, author of Particles of Faith, will share with us how to teach Catholic youth to think critically. I think this is a super important topic. Being a former Catholic high school religion teacher, I understand the challenges in this as a catechist, as a teacher, and even as a youth minister or other parish professional. So once again, thank you all for joining us today, and have an awesome and safe week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.